All right, everybody, we are live with the Combatcast. It's the man they call Dave and Chevy. Hey, guys, before we get started, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about that sponsor. Chevy, let them know.
Yes, we'd like to thank the sponsor, Game Up. They make a thirst-quenching adult beverage with a special blend of electrolytes. Comes in 4 great flavors: fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape.
That's right. And it's only 110 calories, low carb, so you don't have to feel guilty about enjoying it, just like you don't have to feel guilty about enjoying us. And before we get into today's show, Chevy, let's tell people what we got coming up for future episodes.
All right, November 9th, UFC Fight Night, Magny versus Prates. Tough fight for Neil. And then November 16th, UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic for the heavyweight belt. We'll also be talking about just as big of a fight, as unfortunate as it may sound, Tyson versus Jake Paul. Seen a few videos. Tyson looks pretty intense. I don't know if that will translate and he's like 60 years old, but
it's hard to say. Well, it was a couple years ago. He did an exhibition with Roy Jones, and he looked solid, but that's an exhibition. That was a couple years ago. Every year counts when you're getting, older and you're in combat sports.
Right. And he didn't live an easy life,
We give the devil his due. He is a guy that puts the work in, but he also, at the end of the day, he's not shown us yet or anything that he's like some elite boxer. So that's where it's interesting, because Tyson was an elite boxer, but 20 years ago. So what does that all mean? It probably means that Jake Paul has another very well hand-picked opponent that's going to do all right for him and just create some buzz. But we'll cover it. We'll talk about it, and we're going to watch it because it's on Netflix. But, we'll see. But you know what? Before we talk about this weekend's card, let's talk about the big story of the week, UFC 308 review. Chevy, I really enjoyed this pay-per-view. At the same time, I didn't really enjoy it.
It was tough. It was tough, but good fights, exciting fights, early card, so I can't be too upset about it.
No, and let's see, before we get in the main card, I'm just sharing a few things here. Was there any fights you wanted to shout out before we get into the main card of this review?
Bummer, Chris Barnett got knocked out, hurt his leg throwing a spinning kick, ended up getting KO'd, TKO'd after that. That was a bummer, but we can get right into this main card.
Okay. The Pirate.
Sharo Bullet, Magomedov versus Armin Petrosyan.
I mean, double spinning back fist by the Pirate, and he scores the win. It was just about as impressive as I think I've seen a performance for him so far in the UFC. Maybe working out some of those UFC jitters. Obviously, he's still going to be in trouble if he meets like a wrestler, you got to believe. But I like his call out at the end for Adesanya. Maybe it's a little ridiculous, but Adesanya, it'd be an intriguing fight. He's never done it. It's a striking matchup, and Adesanya's not going away. So, hey, I say it's a chance to put yourself on the marquee. Why not shoot your shot?
Yeah, I think you'll see Izzy maybe like put some feelers out and see if that's what people want. It's a favorable fight for Izzy too, because he doesn't really want to be doing wrestling. He'd rather strike with guys. But Shara Bullet is someone that is going to be as close to Izzy's level of striking as possible in the middleweight division. So, but yeah, he got a hand-picked opponent here with Petrosyan, someone who's guaranteed to kickbox with him, and was on a skid, and he threw that double spinning back fist, which was pretty cool. And they did show that he was working on that in like the open workouts. It wasn't just some random thing he threw. That's a planned attack. So very impressive. I hope that they never give him a wrestler and they just keep him as like a fun guy to lead off Middle East cards with, because he's fun to watch when he's striking.
Yeah, and it's nice because most of his fights are early too, so I can just enjoy them. I don't even feel guilty.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Yes. Next fight, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic.
Oh, I think we've skipped one about Lerone Murphy.
Oh, was that before this one?
It was, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige.
Yeah. Murphy, Ige. Trying to remember now. I thought he won the first round, and then I thought Murphy won the second, and then I thought Murphy did enough to win the third. But I remember watching this, and I thought that it wasn't. Unless I'm confusing this, I feel like I felt the same way with Ankalaev's fight too, though. Like it just was. What you? I'm blanking out on this fight now. I remember I thought Murphy won, but I
thought Murphy
blow-away performance.
Not dominated, but I could see him getting every round, to be honest. Depending on how you scored the fight, but
I mean, at the end of the day, he's still undefeated. I say give this guy with a better ranking than him. I don't know if he's in the rankings right now at 15 or 10, but I'd say give him just a guy higher and see where we go here from that. I don't think he's ready for an elite featherweight. I don't think we're putting him with a top 5 yet, but I think the next step up will be someone in that top 10 maybe.
Yeah, maybe like a Bryce Mitchell or something like that would be fun. But yeah, shout out to Lerone Murphy. He's a real problem. I'm with you, though. Bring him along slowly because he's not dominating these guys, but getting the wins. He's a great, great striker. So, but not very cool, the UFC. Like I was saying last week, to reward Dan Ige with, saving a fight for them on 1 hour's notice or whatever, to fly him halfway around the world to fight an undefeated, relatively unknown guy and lose. So not impressed with the UFC there. Hope they hook Dan Ige up. I mean, they don't have to give him a quote unquote winnable fight because it's the UFC, but something more favorable than that. Come on, for real. All right. We'll go back to Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic.
So this was the fight I was more thinking was Ankalaev. I thought he won all the rounds, but I thought all these rounds were like very uneventful. At the same time, I can't say that he's not impressive though. Like he's neutralizing these top light heavyweights in the world. He's a good striker, but he's an even better wrestler. So if he comes up against an elite striker, he can take him down. I can't help but say, at one point, I dreaded this matchup with him and Alex Pereira because I feel like he's going to slow down the Pereira train. But now, Pereira has just been on such a roll, and he's so ready just to fight anybody. I'm just like, you know what? If this is what we're going to do, let's do it. I'm excited for it. And let's see if Pereira can handle this elite light heavyweight. Because if he does, there's really no reason not to send Alex Pereira up to heavyweight at that point and see what he could do. And if Ankalaev beats Alex Pereira, well, so be it. I mean, we could still send Pereira up to heavyweight because, I mean, that's just the way that matchup works.
Yeah, I'm with you. Ankalaev, he's a bad man. Respect to him for being such a great wrestler, but wanting the fight to play out on the feet. Because really, he is levels above Rakic on the ground. So for him to want to keep it on the feet, respect to him, as a fan. I'm with you. I think he's undeniable at this point. Poatan has to give him a title shot, and I'm with you. I'm excited to see that. I want to see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Co-main event. Let's get sad. Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev.
No excuses, but Robert Whittaker found himself in a bad position early. This is MMA, and I would have loved to see him be able to get back to his feet at some point just to see how this fight would have played out. But, man, Chimaev was smart. He took him down fast and early, and he never let up. And you have to give the devil his due at how impressive he is. As nasty as it was to see and to happen to a good guy, that kind of strength in that position to just dislocate Robert Whittaker's jaw and rearrange his teeth, undeniable. This guy is a force. And it also makes me wonder, too, how good is Kamaru Usman, who came off the bench at a higher weight? Like maybe this guy should be fighting at middleweight, but
right.
So that's something to consider, too. But at the end of the day, very impressive performance for Chimaev. And I feel like he's got to skip the line and get the title shot now against DDP. I won't be offended if he fights Strickland first, but and then DDP's waiting. So I don't know. But at the end of the day, I feel like this guy deserves a title shot. I mean, when you look at all the people, he won the title from Strickland, although it was very close.
Right. I thought Strickland won that fight. So I think you got to give it to Strickland. But I do understand how Hamzat is the draw and he might get it ahead of him. Because Strickland's fights have been very boring as of late. And, he talks all this shit, and then the Middle East gives the UFC a lot of money right now, and maybe they want a champion in Hamzat, and maybe some pressure from that. Who knows?
I'll throw this out there. If they do Strickland and DDP next, I would not be against seeing Chimaev and Adesanya go, just to see. I know it's a bad matchup for Stylebender.
I don't want to see that as a Izzy fan, but that makes sense.
Right. What do you think overall?
Yeah, unfortunate for Robert. He talked about how he had that jaw injury. He's had it for his whole life. He actually had his teeth pushed in against DDP when he hit him. And this, it was already weakened. So he has to get it actually fixed now. So Khamzat was certainly winning, but I would have liked to see what happened, obviously. If the fight had gone past that first round, he was all over him with the wrestling, though, and he was really mollywhopping him just with the wrestling. So, respect to Khamzat, he's a monster. He has that tight squeeze, relentless takedowns. I don't think it's next, but the fight that I immediately think of with him is always Bo Nickel. I want to see that Bo Nickel fight. Now, at this point, I do think Bo needs to continue working on his striking for that to be, very evenly matched. But wrestling wise, I want to see them wrestle. So I think that's further down the line.
Quick side note before we go next fight. I thought about this earlier, but it really didn't have anything to do with it. But since you brought up Bo Nickel's name, another fight, stylistically a nightmare for people, but makes kind of sense to not rank their name. The Pirate versus Bo Nickel.
He fucks Sharable up, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Unless he gets knocked out on the first shot, if he takes him down once, it's over. So he needs to get knocked out before he gets that first takedown, and I don't think that happens. So
no, but name wise and momentum wise, I can just see where experience level you could probably try that matchup. But I think that'd be fun for sure while it lasted. Yeah. All right, and that was all the fights that happened, and we are gonna move on right now. Okay, all right. The main event: Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Max was very impressive at the start of this. I was really feeling good about what we had talked about. I thought Max looked quick. I thought what we talked about with Max being susceptible to leg kicks too was still potentially there in the beginning. But, it was going on, and that made it an exciting fight. What I had noticed, though, in particular, more than Max, Ilia, even when he was getting outstruck, I thought he was delivering the more powerful punches. He wasn't doing it often, but there'd be those moments where he just missed, and I'd be like, ooh. But I'm like, so there was always this danger, but I thought, silly me, I felt comfortable. I'm like, okay, this is going to be how this fight plays out. There's going to be, because it was like that with Justin Gaethje to a point too, right?
Yeah.
But then I thought, okay, they might just go swing it. Max was smart by not, and I love the little beginning where Max did the little bull taunt thing.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to do that right in the beginning, which was smart. But at the end of the day, man, Ilia, he kind of reminds me of Max a little bit in the beginning, where Max would sometimes lose rounds, but he was winning the whole fight. He was fighting the fight, and I feel like that's what he was doing. Difference being is, I think they said it, at featherweight, he might be the most powerful featherweight they've had in a long time. I think Conor was the only guy they were talking about at featherweight who was knocking people out like that. People don't remember that necessarily because Conor's become this huge megastar, and there's all this other shenanigans, and his fights at lightweight have been a little up and down. He won the title, but then he never defended it, and then he lost when he came back. But Conor at featherweight had never lost in the UFC, and he smoked all these people. And this is kind of similar with Ilia. Volkov came in afterwards looking for a fight. I could see why you do that, because Volkov had cleaned out the division, even though he had those losses to Islam before with the brutal knockouts.
You mean Volkanovski?
Volkanovski, sorry, yes. But I personally don't hope they do that because I'd like to see Volkanovski actually get a win before he comes back, only because of the violent knockouts, and I think it'd be better for him just to have that kind of momentum going in. I want to.
He is older though, so I think he's pushing for the.
I get it, and he deserves it. You can't deny it. And I think Dana said, everything he's done, he's gonna get it. But Diego Lopez, like that's the fight I'd like to see with Ilya. I don't know that he's gonna beat Ilya, but we'll see how good his chin is because he can crack, and I think it's an interesting matchup. Yeah,
I'm with you. Max was looking good, but he does get hit, and Ilya has just incredible power at 145 pounds, like you were saying, comparable to Conor when he was at 145. So I'm with you. Lopez could be the guy to beat him. I mean, Volkanovski could beat him. I just don't see that at this point. I think Ilya's really at his peak. I just don't think anyone's going to beat him. Maybe Lopez could catch him in something because he's so unpredictable and so difficult to deal with. But I don't see Volkanovski beating him at this point. But good for Ilya. Hope they do that card in Spain for him, like at the Bernabeu. Real Madrid Stadium would be so cool. That would be a huge step for the UFC. I don't think UFC fans realize how historic that is and global that is. So that would be very cool if they can make that happen. And as far as Max, I think he needs to go back up to 145. I think there's just more fights for him there instead of him 155. Yeah, because otherwise he's got to go back in the queue at 145 and beat all these guys he's already beaten. You know who we haven't talked about could be fun against Topuria too, actually, is Yair. He fights once a year or whatever, so we kind of forget about him. But stylistically, he could be very fun against Topuria.
Well, if they do that Volkanovski fight, Diego Lopez and Yair Rodriguez would be a fight that makes sense to me then, and that's a fun fight too. So
very, very fun fight. Yeah.
And for Mars Max, man, he's a BMF champ. He's still, he won that at lightweight. I know there's no real thing with that, but I mean, have him fight maybe a Dan Hooker or somebody and put that BMF title on the line, right?
Have Conor actually come back and do a 165 or something catch weight, because I don't think Conor can make 155 anymore. And Max will fight at whatever weight. He doesn't give a shit, especially for the BMF belt. Then you can legitimize it with Conor, and it'll be a big draw, because obviously it'll be a pay-per-view because it's Conor. And it has to be for a title if it's on a pay-per-view, because for some reason that's the way the UFC works. So you can legitimize the BMF title and call that the title. So I could see that happening, but I don't, just because it's Conor, and I don't see him ever being disciplined enough to come back to fight.
Man, he's got that stuff with the bare knuckle fighting right now, but I thought he only has 2 more fights technically on his contract, right?
Yeah, that's part of the problem, I think, is the UFC is trying to give him stuff he doesn't want to get him to extend his contract. It's a whole
they don't want him
dirty business. Yeah, they don't want him going anywhere. They want to own his rights until he's retired, and then they still hold the contract, so he can't retire and go somewhere else. So. But we'll see with this, we'll see. I don't think that'll happen. I don't see Conor ever getting in the cage ever again as a fighter, maybe as a promoter for sure. But that would be cool for Max to get paid.
How old is Conor? He's still in his mid-30s too?
Yeah, I think he's 36. I think he's close to my age.
Now he could get a few more years. If he could get out of UFC, if he can fight 2 fights,
right? 2 fights in a year. You're not over the hill yet. Yeah. Especially since he's taken so much time off. He's not really training and staying disciplined. He's out there ruining his body with drugs and alcohol. But
yeah. And oh man, he'll be such a size differential. But he would want to probably try to box Jake Paul and do that fight.
Yeah, I mean, that's just money and also fame, which I think is a big part for him as well now. So,
all right, let's get to the fight night this weekend. Albazi versus Moreno and Blanchfield versus Namajunas. I like both these fights, but any fights you want to shout out on this card before we get to it?
This is not an impressive card name-wise, but, sometimes those are the best cards. So, but now let's just – Derrick Lewis is on the undercard. He's fighting some undefeated I can't pronounce the guy's name. Jhonata Diniz. Jhonata Diniz. He's like 8-0, all knockouts, but he's probably been fighting tomato cans, not like the Black Beast. So I'm gonna go with Derrick Lewis knockout round 1.
All right. So this guy is just so we can put some. He's 8-0, like you said, 7 knockouts, 1 decision. Decision was his last fight, which was his second fight in the UFC against a guy named Carl Williams. So he's 2-0 in the UFC. He did get a fight on the Contender Series. Other than that, he has a kickboxing Muay Thai record. Looks like 22 wins and 7 losses, and he was on a 7-fight win streak. So he's a striker. He's going to strike with Derrick Lewis. If he's technical enough and he can avoid Derrick's power, he's got a shot, but Derrick catches you. Good night.
Yeah, for sure. But let's get into this co-main event. I'm excited for this. Erin Blanchfield versus Rose Namajunas.
All right. Erin Blanchfield, 12-2, 2 KOs, 4 subs, 6 decisions, 6-1 in the UFC. Only 1 loss. We will get to that loss in a minute because that's important. Rose Namajunas, 13-6, 2 KOs, 5 subs, 6 decision. Former UFC Women's Strawweight Champion 2 times. She had quite the run at strawweight. Since going to flyweight, though, she's only lost 1 time, and it's the same opponent. Chevy, help me out with this woman's name.
Menin Farrow.
Thank you.
And that was a close fight, too.
Both fights, I believe, were close, too. Yes. So I believe the fight with Blanchfield was a close decision, and the fight with Rose was a close decision where Rose broke her hand, and it was her first fight going up in the weight class. So the point of this all is...
She broke her pinky.
Okay, all right.
All right. I have less, not to be shitty, but...
Anyway, point being, so these two have a common opponent they lost to. It's the only loss they had to at this weight class, and they were very close fights. So this should be a very competitive, even matchup. Rose is dynamic, great experience, but Chevy has kind of sold me on Erin Blanchfield over the years, actually. You've talked about it, and I think that she's a little more natural at this weight class, and I think that she should be able to take Rose down and probably control this fight a little bit better. We'll see as we get into the later rounds because Rose has that championship experience, even though we're only going 3 rounds, and I think that's going to favor Erin as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to take Blanchfield by decision here.
Yeah, if this fight stays on the feet, I like Rose's chances. She has good takedown defense, and
Yes,
I mean, she has great footwork. So it'll be tough for Erin. But I think when she gets her hands on her, she gets her down and beats her up. So I'm with you. I'm going to pick Erin. I'm going to pick her by a close decision.
All right. Let's get to this main event.
All right. Brandon Moreno versus Amir Albazi.
Yeah, Amir Albazi is 17-1, 5 KOs, 9 subs, 3 decisions, 5-0 in the UFC. His last fight, he beat Kai Kara-France by split decision. So that was a big step up for him, and he came through.
Yep.
Brandon Moreno, 21-8-2, 5 KOs, 11 subs, 5 decisions, 2-time flyweight champion. He is tied Davison Figueiredo and Alexander Petroza for second most title fight wins in UFC flyweight division history. Obviously, Mighty Mouse would have that record. Brandon Moreno has really been the guy up until Pantoja recently took his spot, and then he did have a loss to Brandon Royval recently. Mm-hmm. So, again,
split decision
fighters. Albazi appears to be an elite fighter. Kai Kara-France is elite, but that was a close win. I am going to put my money on Moreno here. I think his back is against the wall. I think it's 5 rounds, and I like his chances. I think he's going to finish him with a submission late, round 5. That being said, the one thing I worry about Moreno is coming off a couple losses, is he had so many wars with Davidson Figueiredo over the years. Is he finally getting worn down? We'll see. But I'm going to go Moreno, late submission.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Moreno had a few bumps in the road, but these are versus the top guys. And I think there's a big difference at flyweight between like the top 5 and the rest of the division, just a giant skill gap. So I do think that Albazi is dangerous. We just don't know how dangerous because he hasn't fought those top guys. I think he is a top guy, but until I see it, I think I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno. I think Moreno grinds out a decision win.
Okay. All right. So that's it for this weekend's fight night. Why don't we tell people we got coming up one more time?
November 9th, UFC Fight Night. Neil Magny versus Carlos Prates. Excuse me, 7 p.m. Apex card. And then November 16th from MSG, UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic, heavyweight belt. And we'll also be talking about Mike Tyson and Jake Paul boxing match. And then November 23rd, UFC Fight Night, Yan versus Figueiredo, 6 a.m. Eastern card from China.
Light it up, baby. I'm ready. All right, guys. Enjoy the fights this weekend and enjoy some Game Up.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store.